Welcome to today's Lived Experience webinar, which is titled Lived Experience, a Conversation about Medical Assistance in Dying, otherwise known as MAiD. So my name is Kim McKercher, and I am a provincial coordinator with the Alzheimer Society of B.C, and I will be your host this afternoon for today's webinar. Apologies. So before I introduce today's guest speakers, I would like to take a few minutes to speak about today's discussion. So I want to start by recognizing that the topic of medical assistance in dying is a deeply personal and complex issue, and it may evoke a range of emotions. So it's important that this remains a respectful and compassionate environment where everyone feels safe to share their experiences. So we acknowledge that a dignified death will look differently for each of us. And today we will be sharing lived experience stories, and we'll discuss MAiD as one option that people living with dementia may consider when it comes to making end-of-life decisions. So it's important to note that there are many ways to navigate the dementia journey, and MAiD is one pathway. So the Alzheimer Society of B.C. advocates for people living with dementia, their caregivers, and family members to be included in discussions, decisions, and policies that affect them, including conversations around medical assistance in dying. So when we refer to MAiD today, we are speaking of a medical procedure that involves the administration of medications to intentionally and safely end the life of a person who meets strict legal criteria, and it's at that person's request. So MAiD is intended to relieve suffering and ensure quality of living and dying. Dementia is classified as a neurological or neurocognitive disorder, and people living with dementia are eligible for MAiD in Canada if they meet the eligibility criteria, which does include being able to give informed consent. So the focus of today's webinar will be around sharing lived experience stories. So we won't be discussing the details of MAiD eligibility. So please note that the stories shared today represent an individual or a family's journey, and each person's experience will be unique. But we hope that by sharing personal stories, we can help others feel less alone and support people in making an informed decision about end-of-life care. So in addition, the helpful resources document, which will be shared in the chat box, will direct you to where you can find reliable information about eligibility for people living with dementia, resources, and supports if that is something that you would like more information on. Okay, so it is now my pleasure to introduce our guest speakers. And I'm just going to check, is Myrna able to join yet? Michael? Nope. Sorry, we've had one guest who
Sorry, I was
hasn't.
responding to
Nope.
someone else, but no, I have not seen her.
Okay, thank you for confirming. So we have unfortunately had one guest who hasn't been able to join unexpectedly, but I would like to introduce Melissa and Sigrid and Ash. So I'm going to start with Melissa. Melissa's life was forever changed when her late husband, Robert, was diagnosed with young onset dementia in May of 2021. So working in the social services field, she quickly set out to ensure supports were in place to maintain their health and well-being. Despite being engaged in a number of community programs, Rob made the decision that for him, living life carefully wasn't living. And so Melissa and Rob traveled the MAiD journey together with all of the grace and dignity that they could muster. Following Rob's passing in February 2024, Melissa committed to helping others face their own MAiD journey. So thank you so much, Melissa, for being here today. Next, I'd like to introduce Sigrid. So Sigrid lives on Vancouver Island with Teddy, her canine companion. Her husband, Charles, lived with Alzheimer's disease for many years before accessing a medically assisted death in 2022. Sigrid dedicates her time to volunteering with the MAiD Family Support Society, offering peer support to other people accompanying a loved one through the MAiD process, and has recently co-presented some education sessions sharing her lived experiences. In her free time, Sigrid enjoys tap and line dancing at her local senior center. So Melissa and Sigrid, I just want to sincerely thank you both for sharing your MAiD stories with us today. And it's been an honor to get to know you both a little bit during the planning session. And I'm just very grateful to have your presence here. So thank you.
Thank you.
So unfortunately, Myrna hasn't been able to join us today, so we will miss her voice and her experiences on our panel, but I know we still have some really meaningful stories to share. And I would like to just introduce some support that will be in the background today. So also joining us is Ash. She is a clinical resource coordinator and social worker with the Assisted Dying Program at Vancouver Coastal Health. And Ash will be supporting today's webinar by helping direct people to information and resources in the chat box. And she'll also join us for the Q&A portion at the end of today's session. So thank you, Ash, for supporting our webinar today. And just a really warm welcome to each of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to start our discussion today by sharing Sigrid's story. So through her work with MAiD Family Support Society, Sigrid has created a deeply touching video of her and her husband Charles' journey with MAiD. So we would like to share this 5-minute video with you today. Okay.
My husband Charles was an independent guy who was always good with his hands. He tinkered with boats and old cars. He renovated everything. But his biggest love was for carving. When he was in his late 60s and having trouble with some of those activities, he went to see his doctor, who sent him off to see a geriatric specialist. As we were opening the door to walk out of the office after Charles' thorough medical checkup, the specialist looked directly at me and said, "In case you're wondering about a diagnosis, we're looking at early stage Alzheimer's." Nothing was really ever the same again. For days, I couldn't stop crying. Charles was more pragmatic. He said, "Just so you know, I won't be around to see the end of Alzheimer's. I never did learn how to swim." I knew what he was trying to tell me. We lived on an island surrounded by water. Although there were difficult times over the next 10 years, Charles did his best to find enjoyment where he could. He loved being on his own, walking the dogs. I always worried as he headed out the door that he might get lost, or worse. Luckily, he also enjoyed things like reading, writing, and spending time with friends and relatives, things that were relaxing for both of us. And he still liked being goofy sometimes. When we discovered that he was eligible to apply for MAiD, he asked me to help him. The first psychiatrist we met with told Charles that many people with Alzheimer's were happy living in an extended care home. She said when the time came, staff would feed him, dress him, change him, and keep him comfortable. That eventually he wouldn't even know he had dementia. She had described my husband's worst nightmare. We looked for another doctor. I found the MAiD application process complicated and confusing. The capacity assessment was extremely stressful, as his acceptance for MAiD hinged on it. We were both incredibly relieved when he was finally approved. No need for a watery tragedy now. He started having daily naps. After lunch, I'd tuck him into bed, give him a kiss, and say, "Have a good sleep." And he always replied, "I'll dream of you." One afternoon, Charles came into the house looking very upset, and he asked me to call the MAiD provider. I balked. He had had a terrifying episode of confusion. I told myself he would forget all about the incident by morning. He did forget. But the next afternoon, he had another terrifying episode, and again asked me to call her. And so I called. He took the phone and asked the doctor to come as soon as she could. She said she'd be there in 48 hours. We spent those hours hugging and crying, saying goodbye, looking at photographs, talking about the life and the love we'd shared. Time took on a surreal, elastic quality. Every moment seemed to stretch out, and at the same time, the hours flew by. At one point, Charles asked, "Why am I doing this right now?" I reminded him of the hallucinations, and he said, "Oh yeah, I never want to live through anything like that again." He headed outside to enjoy one last Cuban cigar with a splash of red wine, and then it was time. The doctor had arrived. She spoke softly about all the love she could feel in the room and about how brave Charles was. When she asked if he was sure, Charles said yes, that he was ready. I was able to hold his hand in mine as he quietly fell asleep. He died peacefully, knowing that he was loved, and for that I am incredibly grateful.
Okay. Thank you. I want to just share a special thank you to Sigrid as well as to the MAiD Family Support Society for allowing us to share that truly beautiful video of your story. And Sigrid, I just wanted to ask, what went into the creation of that video and why was it so important for you to share your story with others?
Well, when we were given the opportunity to make a video, I think 8 of us made a video of our experience, and it was really an interesting way to kind of process the whole experience. I think my main reason for doing it was because I want more people to know that someone with dementia is eligible to apply for MAiD, because I think it wasn't at that time well known. So that was my main reason for doing it. But it was also kind of a therapeutic process to go through to, write a story and, go through photographs and, kind of process all those emotions. I think I'm the kind of person who, if I have an uncomfortable emotion, that the best way for me to deal with it is to kind of dive into it, and it kind of takes the power away. So it was a very engaging process, and we had I think 5 weeks of kind of Zoom lessons to do it. The first week we wrote the story, and the second week we picked photographs and all that kind of stuff. So it was a very engaging process, and I have had the opportunity to show it quite a few times. So I think it was very much worthwhile. So I appreciate that we were able to have that opportunity, those of us who did do that. So, and I still get a little emotional when I watch it. So sorry, I'm a little bit emotional. Yeah.
No, I just deeply appreciate you sharing your video and your story with us. And it's really important to help people feel less alone who are walking this journey. So thank you so much.
Welcome.
I just want to say a quick hi to Myrna. Hi. And Melissa, would you be able to share a little bit about your and Rob's MAiD story with us today?
For sure. Hello, everybody. And I just want to acknowledge that I'm meeting with you on the traditional territory of Comox First Nation. So Rob and I were together for 1/7 of his life. For almost 10 years, we experienced the juxtaposition of deep, fulfilling joy and love and the desperation of foreboding loss. The first 5 years, he sweetly courted me, and then soon after our marriage, he was diagnosed with early onset dementia. So it was a story of still much joy, but also sand passing through a clenched hand. The same month he was diagnosed, his sister-in-law, our sister-in-law, was passed away in palliative care at St. Jove's with no option for MAiD. Norma Jean suffered and passed away alone, and Rob indicated then he would not want the same option, that he would choose MAiD. So the MAiD conversation began. Then the following year in July, his father passed away in the late stages of dementia, and he didn't know Rob anymore. And so Rob decided it was time for MAiD and gave up living his life more carefully. He set his mind to do whatever he pleased and to go down in a blaze of glory. He wanted to coach hockey, make the final changes to each PhD, and show me Europe. We navigated through MAiD through Rob's GP, and the MAiD doctor was in the same doctor group, and he was approved for MAiD just about a month and a half after we made the application. At that time, he was told his early onset dementia was aggressive and he would probably need to choose a date in early winter. The MAiD doctor provided us with a card with hospice and Bridge C14's contact, and I reached out, but the referral process took time. He, of course, shared the news with our kids, and his mother was still alive, and he didn't want to leave before she did, so we were really not sure if this was going to be happening. The Bridge C14 volunteer that reached out and advised us of the Death Cafe, and so it was new to Comox, and we went there, and through that connection, we met a death doula who intersected other parts of our life. And so as Rob was progressing, by then he'd had a nighttime episode and he'd lost his way driving. So he was then advised not to drive and not to leave the province. Ice skating was beyond his reach, so coaching was out, and the second car was sold, and we needed to cancel our European river cruise. So lots of loss already was ongoing. We prepared for his last Christmas. He was a history and English high school teacher and then a post-secondary educator. He was a prolific reader with an expansive library, a published author, and a superb storyteller. He loved Shakespeare and everything British. So we put together bags of books, a selection of his neckties, his funny shirts, and a bottle of champagne for each of our family members. And this was his subtle and not so subtle way of letting people know he'd made a decision. At the next MAiD doctor meeting in January, Rob was assessed to have stabilized. So we proceeded with having MAiD doctor appointments every 2 months to assess his progress. His mother passed away that spring, enabling Rob to just really lean into this was his process, and he was free to carry on. We continued to seek joy and laughed often. That was a really big part of our medicine. I returned to work. Rob went into programming, and he embraced these changes with ease and grace. He packed his computer bag with books. He got on the handy dart and he told stories. I'm going to continue telling his story throughout the conference, if that's okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Melissa. I really appreciate you sharing that with us, and it's lovely to get to know a little bit more about Rob. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Myrna, I'm going to direct the next question to you, but if it's okay, I'd like to introduce you. So Myrna is somebody that I have had the pleasure of knowing for quite a number of years now, I believe 12 years. And she is a published author. She has served many years as part of the Alzheimer Society of B.C.'s leadership group, is a passionate dementia advocate, and a vital part of the Society's Lived Experience Partner Program. So Myrna is living with cognitive impairment, and she has a keen interest in end-of-life decision-making and ensuring that people affected by dementia have the right to a dignified death, however that might look for them. And so Myrna also volunteers her time with the Purple Angels Dementia Support Program in Maple Ridge, BC, and was recognized as a community champion by the City of Maple Ridge. So thank you so much for being here, Myrna, and we're very delighted to have you as part of this conversation. And so I'd love to ask you a question around end-of-life decision-making. And Myrna, I know that protecting end-of-life rights for people living with dementia is an issue that's important to you. And so drawing on both your personal experiences and your advocacy work, can you tell us why it's important for people living with dementia to be included in all decisions impacting their life and care, including end-of-life decisions?
Yeah, it's a really tough thing, isn't it? Oftentimes, I deal with care partners and people with lived experience of dementia. And because at one time I was actually diagnosed with dementia, I had to fight for people to still accept me as a person, because people wanted to say, doctors wanted to talk to my husband. We've all heard that kind of story before. And so it was really important for me to stand up for my own person and values, and also to help others feel that same desire to remain who they are for as long as they possibly can. And at the very beginning, I did fill a very large bottle with a lot of drugs. And I told my family, all of my family, that the decision to end my life would be mine, not theirs. And I would do that when I felt the timing was right. That was before MAiD, actually. That was at the very beginning of my journey 18 years ago. So I've got to see sort of both sides of the story. I've seen care partners really, really be devastated with the loss of their person as the dementia continues. And I've seen them put their person into care. And I've seen the devastating effect on the person in care and the care partner with guilt. Now, we all know there's no reason to have that guilt. What we're doing is what we believe is the best thing. And that's why it's so important to involve people with dementia in those kinds of decisions while they can still do it. I'm on a committee in Waterloo, Ontario, and we're going to be doing 2 videos helping people with dementia, helping caregivers, and helping doctors assist people with dementia with their own deaths. We all know, we all have a sense of what we think would be a good death. I want to be at a campfire with somebody playing the guitar and just fade away. That probably won't happen, but that's my dream. And most of us felt that nature nurtures, and most of us wanted to die outdoors. And I find that really interesting. And what's vital to me is that we honor the wishes of the people with dementia, allow them the responsibility and their right to die as they see fit.
Thank you. Thank you, Myrna. Thank you for sharing what a good death looks like for you, and also the importance of having those conversations, because unfortunately, dementia can rob people of that opportunity if we don't have them early. And so I hope discussions like this will help facilitate those conversations so that people can share their wishes with their family, whatever those wishes may be. So thank you for that. And thank you for all the work you're doing. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Just one note, Singrid, your story is so impactful and so filled with generosity and love and death. And it's all part of life, isn't it? So I'm just honored that I got to see that. Thank you so very much.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
And Melissa, to you as well. Thanks for sharing all that. It's painful, but the more we say it, the less painful it becomes and the more joyous it becomes.
Totally. And thank you. I really appreciate your story as well. It's so long and so complicated. And you are such a person to just really elevate not only yourself, but your story elevates other people. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So Melissa, I'd like to ask a question. around why it was so important for you to honor Rob's decision to have a medically assisted death and what emotions you experienced following his decision.
So as indicated before, I'm a longtime social service sector worker, and I know very well that there's lots of information out there and it can be really confusing and complicated. It was really important that I support Rob in his end of life decision and help him navigate or lead the way so he could be navigated to feel empowered and dignified in his last, it was actually 3.5 years of his time on this earth. I know in the world I work in, folks do best with information. Information is knowledge, knowledge is power. And so I set about finding all the information that was available to support us on Rob's journey. So this brought an exhaustive orchestra of really complex feelings of grief, loss, gratitude, and joy. Upon his diagnosis, the medical advice was to keep his life as stable as possible. So at the time, we were both doing graduate degrees. We moved on to Rob's property full time, and we started significant repairs. I mean, it was COVID. It was a really unique and strange time. And our marriage was really young. And so we had all of these hopes and dreams that just really crumbled. But then I really recognized that there were other dreams to be had. And I just really needed to focus on recalibrating. I was working full time, commuting, and then I had some health stuff with my eye. So I went off for about 6 months. And that really afforded time to really help Rob to navigate because he didn't want to retire. And so he needed to consult with his lawyer, who was also a good friend. He wrote him this great letter indicating that he was a liability, but also he was an eccentric curmudgeon. So I got him a sweatshirt with eccentric curmudgeon on it, and he wore that proudly. So that was fun, but life was rough and it was hard. It was hilarious. It was heartrending. I had to find peace without answers. I needed to honor him in a way that really celebrated his entire life, of which I didn't know maybe necessarily all the information. It was important to hold us buoyant, our family members buoyant along this really interesting MAiD journey and to take care of my heart. So I commute on my commute, which is a 2-hour each way. It afforded me private space to wail. I did. To listen to podcasts related to death and dying, and to sing for my soul. We also did all kinds of road trips together. Rob was a fanatical sports guy. We went to as many sporting events as we could. His mom was in Victoria, so we would go down there. We explored the island. It just made time to reflect on life, to tell stories. We created playlists and prepared for his passing. He was a pretty subtle man, so I would note in the things and I kept a list and I would check out with him if my list was accurate. So to capture how he wanted to sort of live out his last days and to honor him to the very end. I would do this. I would wish this for me, and I would do this for anybody who asked of me, because it is such an important part of living is dying.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think you encapsulated the emotional range that someone would go through so beautifully in that statement. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sigrid, I'd like to ask a question of you. During your video, you spoke a little bit about how the MAiD process can be a complicated one and that there can be a lot of unknowns during the process, particularly for someone living with dementia, knowing that capacity can be an issue. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about what that experience of not knowing how your MAiD journey would end and how that impacted you. And when we were planning for this, we talked a little bit of almost being in limbo during that time.
Yeah. So at the beginning of the disease process for Charles, I think I mentioned in the movie that he was very clear that he did not want to live to the end of it. He really did not want to live in a care home or be dependent on other people. So, and that was a long time before his death, like 10 years before his death. So in those days, MAiD wasn't an option for anybody, actually. So he had a plan to end his own life, which I didn't really ask very much about, because I didn't really want him to focus on it too much. And you know, it was just so upsetting to think about how lonely that would be, and how, well, it just would be such a difficult experience to have somebody end their own life. So to have him end his own life. So, and, you know, there was always kind of that anxiety with dementia, like, how's it going to go? And, you know, how fast is it? And he declined very slowly, which was great. He was a real homebody. He loved reading, and, you know, for a long time he was able to carve, and loved his dog walks, as I say in the movie. And you know, so those days, in a way, it was just more, you know, day to day getting along. But then once he was able to apply for MAiD, I've supported some people who have found it very straightforward. It's gone very smoothly. Ours wasn't so smooth. He ended up, his GP retired just before he was able to apply. So, and then we moved. We built a little laneway house in Nanaimo on my brother and sister-in-law's property. And so we lost our medical contacts. So we had to kind of start again. So he ended up seeing quite a few different doctors, which was, and most of them were so lovely. We had one terrible experience, but most people were very compassionate. But it seemed like it was a lot to go to, you know, he had several capacity assessments and Montreal cognitive assessments. And anyway, so the hardest part for me was once he was accepted, I couldn't quite see, you know, he was continuing to decline, couldn't quite see what was going to make him think, okay, you know, today's the day, or yes, I want to go ahead, or no, I don't. Because I think we have such a strong urge to live, humans, that I just couldn't quite picture what was going to happen. So I found myself holding those two options, like either he's going to be gone soon, or he'll live for many years and be in care, because his health was actually excellent, except for his dementia. So that was quite stressful, not knowing. But you know, I just ended up going from day to day and doing the best I could. And he, as I say in the movie, he finally got to a point where he was more afraid of living than dying. So he did make that choice, and but it certainly was stressful waiting to find out what was going to happen. So yeah. I think the other thing is, as somebody who's a care partner, you can see the bird's eye view of what's happening and how he's doing and how long it is until the waiver date, because he didn't know that anymore. He didn't know calendar time anymore. So I knew kind of how long we had, and so that was stressful too. I didn't want to bring it up too often to be you know, upset him, or anyway. There you go. It was what it was. And I'm very grateful that he was able to access MAiD. So.
Thank you, Sigrid. And I think it's important to share some of the complexities that can accompany this process, particularly when dementia is involved. And so thank you for sharing more about what that journey was like for you. Okay, so at this time, I would like to share another story. So this is Dawn's story, and I'm going to read it to you today. So in December of 2024, I had the opportunity to speak with a gentleman named Don who was living with vascular dementia. We had a conversation over the phone the day before he received a medically assisted death. He wanted to share his story with others living with dementia. So when asked what factors played a role in his decision, he told me that his wife had passed away very unexpectedly in their home 5 years earlier, and that he didn't have an opportunity to say goodbye to her. This loss impacted him greatly. When he received his vascular dementia diagnosis, it was very important to him to have the opportunity to say goodbye to the people he loved, and he wanted to control the timing of his death and ensure that he was cognitively present to have those last moments with his family and friends. So he stated to me, "It has been a blessed experience to see and talk with and say goodbye to all of my friends and relatives." When asked what he most wanted to share with others living with dementia who might be considering MAiD, he told me, "Make a special effort to get around and see your friends and family. It was very reassuring and it felt good. I'm very grateful for this option and that my daughters have come around to the idea. It has been magnificent to have this kind of family support. Most people don't get a chance to say their goodbyes." So he also shared that it was his decision to decide when he was ready to go, and he reaffirmed that he can change his mind right up into the last moment, but he told me that he was at peace with his decision. So what I took away from our conversation was that he felt empowered to take back some control over what can be a very unpredictable disease, and that the support of his family in honoring his wishes was very important to him and allowed him to say goodbye on his terms. So recently, I also spoke with Don's daughter, who walked this journey alongside him. And she wanted all of you to know that while his death was very peaceful and in all regards a lovely end to his life, and that she was grateful that she could provide that for him, for the surviving family members, there are a lot of complex emotions and feelings of grief and guilt that can follow. So given her dad's vascular dementia was progressing slowly, she does grapple with the unknowns and wonders if they could have had more time together. Despite Don wanting to mitigate grief by arranging many opportunities to say goodbye to those that he loved, he is still deeply missed. So her wish is that there are more supports available for people living with dementia, including counseling services for those considering a medically assisted death and bereavement support. And so I just want to sincerely thank Don and his family for sharing their story with us today. And accessing support is a really big part of this discussion and ensuring that nobody walks this path alone. And so I'd like to talk a little bit more about how each of you found support. So Melissa, if I can start with you. Where did you find your greatest source of support during your MAiD journey and then following your husband's passing? Oh, you're on mute, Melissa.
Sorry, it's a bit of a story because it kind of as the journey unfolded, the support evolved. So initially, when Rob was diagnosed at the Wellness Center in Comox, we met with his psychiatrist and his OT. They came to the home, and they were initially a great support. And they referred us to the BC Alzheimer Society, and somebody called us, which was great, and then hooked me up with the monthly caregiver support circle. And then that person would check in quarterly and just see how we were doing, but didn't really have a lot more services to offer. And through the caregiver support circle group, I learned that there was an after hours number to call if you needed to, but then discovered that that was very minimally staffed because there just wasn't enough people to do the work. I learned about the BC Brain Health program through UBC, and that was really great in the initial stages of Rob's diagnosis. We took virtual improv classes together, and it was hilarious. We did a couples movement class together, which was fun. It helped Rob do some mobility work. I took an art in motion art therapy class that afforded me space to process feelings through art, and I still dip into that class. We didn't get any services through hospice. We were told we were ineligible. So the Wellness Center, where Rob was diagnosed, they did a 12-week cognitive stimulation pilot program. And there was a monthly caregiver support meeting. And so that was really great to stimulate Rob when he was on, I'm going to try and beat this. We fundraised for the Alzheimer's Walk and we met people that way. We continued going to the Death Cafe, which helped pave a road to this is where we're going, and then support for me following. Rob was awarded his PhD, so that was amazing in September of 2023. We had reconnected with Sherry, the death doula, who was a solid support for Rob closing in on his last few months. She really helped him do some sorting and got us, like, because he had a whole life of the things that needed to be sorted. And that was on his list of things to do in order to pass. So we met with our celebrant who married us. And we planned the celebration of life, and that was a really big support because, I mean, our time together hadn't been very long. But between Sherry and Jennifer, they navigated us to a spiritual counselor, because one of the kind of barriers for Rob leaving, although mentally he wanted to make the decision and he had, but he didn't know how to give up his fight. So he sought guidance on how to let go in this world. Sherry, the death doula, worked at a funeral home, so we were able to get support. It was all quite smooth and seamless, getting all the kind of pragmatic pieces figured out. We celebrated our last Christmas again. We had another last Christmas. I hung all of his awards and mementos in the living room. I put up a dartboard. I made a sign because he was now a doctor of education, but he didn't get to enjoy it in his career. So we called it Dr. Rob's Pub, with a sign that said open. And we had fun. He put his parents' ashes to rest on January 9th and set his date for February 1st. So family were a big support to the degree that they could, because Rob didn't want to sort of circle everybody around until the end. We had a big party the night before. We played darts and laughed and reminisced. And then the day of, he just wanted a normal day. He didn't want to wait. So we got up and went to his favorite restaurant. We met his brother and niece and nephew and played golf. He passed off his golf clubs. Our kids had gone to Costco and got him hot dogs and French fries, and we had that for lunch, lots of ketchup. And then went to our neighbors and he said goodbye. And he told one neighbor, you know, I'm going to die now. And I just want to thank you for being a good neighbor most of the time. And he was having a bench installed in the beach access, and they argued about, because his neighbor wanted this bench too. So it was a funny story. And so he said goodbye, and then we came in and we did our last dance, and the nurse had arrived to put the IV in. And then the doctor arrived, and family and friends witnessed his last breath. He wanted to pass to Brown Eyed Girl, or he wanted to go to sleep to Brown Eyed Girl, and he wanted to pass to the song Drifting Away. It was just really, really beautiful. And once his body was moved, off, he wanted this bench installed in the beach access. So my brother had started to dig the hole, which he had inspected, and we all went across the road in the pouring rain with headlamps and installed this bench. And we all laughed because we could feel him there with us. It was quite public in the end. I didn't know that was how it would go. But the family, the neighbors, and all the supports along the way were necessary at those particular parts of the journey. And then some things that I found helpful. I could only go to hospice for 2 Wednesday morning classes when Rob passed away. I needed to go back to work. So I set myself with the task of finding a grief counselor to help me process so I could return to work. And the most kind of useful thing that I did to help me move through my grief was the Bridge C14 12-week spousal grief group, where I finally found my people. It was a really, really good fit. I liked that there was steps every week that you were tasked to do. From that, I found this book, 365 Days of Grief. And it also led me to the Solve for Happy, which was a really good book. And just really, I mean, I've been on a journey of grief, as Sigrid and others probably well know. And there's also a pathway to live again. And so I found my way. One other resource I wanted to share was that Rob didn't talk a lot about his illness, but he was a business guy. He always had business cards. So I made a business card. You can't really see, but it has the forget-me-not flower. It says, "Please be patient. I have memory problems." And then "Don't change, even if I do" was on the back, and our contact information, so that when Rob started, he just gave them out to everybody. And when Rob started to have walkabouts, people would let me know where they were, where he was. And it was a way to really kind of experience a little bit of the dementia-friendly Canada. That I think that's another area that is being sort of worked on federally and provincially, is to make these communities that are safe for folks with brains that are changing, to be able to be safe and be connected. That was a lot.
That was incredible. And there's so many, I think, pieces that people can take away, and so many avenues for support. And it really took a whole community to embrace you and Rob on this journey. And thank you so much for sharing all those details, because I think those are pieces that people can really take away from this webinar.
You're welcome.
And how much support we need on this journey too. Sigrid, if it's okay, can I ask a similar question of you, kind of around where you found support? And I know you do your own peer support work and help others walking this journey. So yeah, just a little bit about what's been supportive for you and how you help others.
Yeah, so the Alzheimer Society set up a caregiver group on Gabriola, which is where we were living when Charles was first diagnosed. And that group, we ended up meeting every week in person before COVID. And it was so wonderful to have, we laughed so much and cried and hugged everybody all the time. And that was really great for that part of Charles' illness. And then, and also when he was first diagnosed, I actually started seeing a therapist once a month, and I still see her. So it's been like 12 years every month. So she's, helped me through the whole journey of illness and MAiD anxiety and grieving. And I did reach out to the MAiD Family Support Society when I learned about it, after Charles was accepted. And it was a fairly new organization. And so they didn't actually have anybody who had experience with dementia. And so I had like specific questions around that. So I had a nice conversation with one of the volunteers, but I decided after Charles died that that's why I volunteered for them, is because I wanted to be that person, since there wasn't anybody. Now I think there are 3 or 4 people who have experience with dementia and MAiD. So that's really great. Unlike Melissa and Rob, Charles and I are much more sort of quieter people. So in fact, Charles, in a way, he was very open. He told everybody that he'd applied and been accepted for MAiD, so everybody knew that. But when he decided in that last 48 hours, he decided that it was time, he didn't want to say goodbye to anybody. So he just wanted me there and my brother and sister-in-law who live across the yard. So they were very helpful through his, through the MAiD process, and they came and were with us. But after he died, I hadn't thought really that far ahead, even because it was such a short period of time, that 48 hours. so I phoned some relatives and they all came over. And it was fantastic for me, actually, because Charles was still here lying on the couch, looking very peaceful. And so, his son came over, the grandchildren came over, my, siblings came over, and everybody, there was sushi, somebody ordered sushi, and we had, there was wine. And anyway, it was really lovely for me to have that. People were crying and laughing and, telling stories, and it was very supportive. And those people have, been very supportive in the long run. I also have been was introduced to a small group of women on Vancouver Island whose husbands had dementia and MAiD. And so we lived quite far apart. So we would get together every couple of months for like a 4 or 5 hour lunch and tell stories about her husbands and laugh and cry and all that kind of stuff. And I think the medical people were very supportive. And I also have a grief buddy. It didn't even occur to me to join up with Bridge C14, but Melissa, I think that would have been really helpful. I don't know why I didn't think of it, but that's something that I understand is very helpful for people. Now I know about it. I probably don't need it now, but let's see what else. Yeah, so now being a volunteer with MAiD Family Support helps me to some extent to, again, with my own grief, it helps somehow. So it's quite therapeutic to be a support to other people as well. I think that's all I have to say at the moment.
That was wonderful. Thank you. And it's lovely to hear that there are now people at the MAiD Support Society who specifically can speak to some of those nuanced questions around dementia and accessing MAiD.
Yeah, exactly. I actually do have one more quirky thing to add about myself, as again, different from Melissa. I decided right after Charles died, it was difficult for me to be with people and just chit chat because my brain was so taken up with what a profound experience I'd been through. So I just said to everybody, you know what, I'm going to spend a month at home on, by myself with my dogs, and I'm going to, meditate. I'm going to go for lots of dog walks. I'm going to eat whatever I want, whenever I want. I'm going to turn on music and dance in my kitchen, and I'm going to watch, sappy movies and do whatever. And it was great, and cry as much as I want to, whenever I want to. And that was, for me, that worked really well. I think everybody's so different. And I'm actually kind of surprised I came up with it, but it worked well. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. And yeah, everybody is going to move through the grief process differently, but both of you have provided so many different avenues for accessing support. I hope that will be helpful. There are some questions about what is Bridge C14. Melissa, I don't know if there's anything further you could share about that nonprofit.
Sure, it's a federal not-for-profit, and Bridge C14 was like the founding organization that really advocated for MAiD to come in to law. And it's been and I believe you me, I'm not the expert of Bridge C14, but I knew of that because there had been a woman, the first person who really fought, and I'm not doing her justice by remembering her name, but just really fought for the right to die, the right to die with dignity. And that always really stuck with me. And so in my social worker world, I just thought I must be able to find something. And it was on the card from Dr. Regler. But what I learned is that they were still in their infancy and developing services. And they evolved from the time that Rob was first diagnosed in 2021 to the time that he passed. And then I was able to attend the spousal support group. They had evolved a lot. And so it's a really important place to connect with, and the range of services depends upon the volunteers in each province.
Thank you. And we do have their link to their webpage on the helpful resources document if you'd like to learn more. Myrna, I would like to ask a question to you kind of about what types of support are helpful. So as someone living with mild cognitive impairment, what type of support would you like to see from your family members, your friends, and healthcare providers when it comes to helping someone have these conversations, share their wishes? How can families support that?
You know, it seems so basic to say, but accepting the person with all their rights and responsibilities, that I want my family to see and honor my wishes merely because I'm a person just like they are. I'm not special. I'm not, I'm just me. And unfortunately, I see oftentimes that people aren't given credit for voicing their concerns and having those around them accept those concerns at face value. And being able, of course, to talk them through, but to initially accept, not deny the person's dreams and wishes. I think it's so vital, and it's, you know, we all, I think everybody in the world has, and stigma is not the right word, but I'm going to use it because I can't remember the right word. Everybody has a bias towards something. And we literally need to throw the biases away and accept each other for who we are, whether you have warts on your face or not. Like, we just really need to get there. We've been working at this for over 2,000 years. I think it's time we do it. I love working with, I have all men in my dementia support group. I have a riot with them. They all want to play hoops. They all want to throw bing bags and me pick them up and bring them back so they can throw them again. And often they hit me with them before I'm walking back. So it's more like a fun time. The guys need to relax. On Sunday, we all went out for breakfast. Isn't that cool? Everybody met at a restaurant for breakfast. And there's no, he has dementia and he doesn't. It's just like you folks were saying, it's family. And when it's a family of people with dementia and care partners and families, it builds such a secure bond. And so I need and I expect my family to be fully behind when I make the decision for MAiD.
Thank you, Myrna. Can you speak to the healthcare provider's role? Like, I know you've had a number of medical appointments over the years, and has that conversation been facilitated, and how could maybe healthcare providers help people talk about that?
You know, right now there's a contest in provincial government to nominate your favorite doctor. And I recently nominated my doctor. And then when I spoke to him, I told him, and he said, but why, Myrna? And I said, because you actually listen. You actually hear what I'm saying when I come to see you. So I was initially diagnosed with frontal temporal, given 5 to 8 years to live. My life totally changed in huge ways. Then I was diagnosed with Lewy body and lost my driver's license. And then I was diagnosed with dementia, with Alzheimer's. And so I was just kind of doing this for a lot of years. But advocacy, working on behalf, and actually using my voice to say, we are all people. And when it's my time, please grant me, and I'm going to say serenity, to be able to make that decision, and please honor it. Medical people in the past, and things have changed greatly in that 18 years. The last 5 years, I find medical people are actually listening to us, looking at us when we're in an appointment with them instead of our spouses or our care partners. Things are really changing. And not to say it's not tough. I've lost 4 of my folks have died and 4 are in care now. So it's really, really tough. But please, please, please honor the wishes of the person with dementia and caregivers. I know it's so hard, but please do it for you and for them.
Thank you, Myrna. That was very beautifully said. All right. Well, we've come to the end of our formal part of our discussion, and I would like to open it up if there's any closing thoughts that you would like to share. Maybe there's, one thing that you really hope people take away from this webinar and this discussion. Please feel welcome to say something to our participants. And I want to just take the opportunity to thank each of you for being so open and vulnerable. I know this is an emotional topic, and you shared so many helpful tips and strategies, so thank you. And I can see lots of thanks in the chat box as well.
I just want to say that Charles' death was so lovely and peaceful, and I'm so grateful that we live in Canada where we have that option to, and it wouldn't, of course, not going to be everybody's option, and I don't mean to promote it so much as just say that if that turns out to be a choice that somebody makes, it's certainly a wonderful way to end your life. I'm hoping that I get some kind of disease where I can choose that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sigrid.
And I would like to just add that services have evolved since we started our MAiD journey. If you haven't found what you need or what you're looking for, to keep asking. This presentation today is something that I hoped would eventually come, where also BC Alzheimer's and MAiD have come together to do a presentation, which is great. That wasn't available when I was on this journey. And so amplify your voice if needed.
Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, we do find it important. We provide education on living well with dementia, on supporting people throughout the entirety of the journey. And so we also want to provide information and education around end-of-life decisions, whatever that may look like. And medical assisted death is one of those decisions. And so we hope by sharing stories, it will help people feel less alone. And just there's so much knowledge, I think, shared from those that have walked this journey before us. So thank you. Your learnings from your own experience can now help so many others. Okay, so I'm going to invite Ash to join us, who has been monitoring the chat along with Michael. And hi, Ash, thank you for that. I saw you replying to many questions. And just open up some time for questions or comments that you'd like to share with our panelists. Please do try to keep the questions as much as possible to people's personal experiences, because that's really what we're here today, is to share lived experience and people's stories. Ash, were there any questions while you were monitoring the chat that you wanted to address?
I think one of the very first ones, I tried to reply, but it was getting quite lengthy. And it was about capacity of knowing when someone can start the MAiD process. We encourage people who call for information that if someone's wanting to apply and see if they're eligible, even if they're worried about capacity, to send in the request form, which is the 3-page form that starts the process, because the assessors assess for capacity for the patient's ability to ask for MAiD and become eligible for MAiD in the assessments. And it's built into that process. But if you hold off too long, you may get to the stage where you don't have the capacity to be found eligible, and then you miss the care option. Whereas when you're eligible, you don't become ineligible. You may miss a window of being able to consent at the end, But eligibility, once you're eligible, you're eligible. And there is what's called a waiver of final consent once you're eligible for people who it is expected that they would lose capacity. And that's something you can explore with your MAiD provider. And it kind of opens up the care option to give you more of a choice. And again, no one's ever pressured to set a date or move forward with MAiD. But with Alzheimer's and dementia, the risk is that you will lose the chance by applying too late. You don't have to be ready to have MAiD when you apply to be eligible. But you do need the capacity to get through the assessments. And what that at a very reductive level looks like is being able to articulate your suffering, being able to articulate what your disease, illness, or disability is causing that suffering and why, and what you are asking for. It's not saying that you're asking for it tomorrow or next month or even in a year. But it is that nuance with Alzheimer's and dementia that it is better to apply and be eligible sooner rather than later. It's not an advanced directive, so you do need a formal diagnosis and there needs to be collateral there. But I think that would be my main takeaway for anyone who is living with Alzheimer's or dementia and thinks that this could possibly be something that they want in the future.
Thank you for that. There was a question about accessing the form that you mentioned. Would they go to their health
I can
authority?
actually, it's the same form for all of BC, so I can put it in the chat. And then at the bottom of page 3, there's all the emails and faxes for each health authority. So just make sure you find the one you live in. We'll forward it to whatever office if we get it and it's the wrong office as well.
Thank you. Lots of people asking if this will be recorded. It absolutely will be. The helpful resources document will be linked along with the recording on our YouTube page. Unfortunately, the chat comments will not be shared just because it has people's names. So if you can copy any additional links from the chat box, but the helpful resources document will be available. Sigrid, there is a question asking if you might be open to speaking a little bit more about how you navigated the stress of whether or not your husband might go through with MAiD. The person asking is a care partner. The person has qualified for MAiD as an option, but does not know if she will access a medically assisted death or not, and it's finding it very stressful in that limbo period. I know you spoke to this a bit already, but is there anything else you might share to somebody who's experiencing that stress that you felt?
I think it's just stressful. I don't know if it can be relieved. One of the things I did do with Charles at one point is I said to him, you've got a choice. You could choose MAiD, you've already been approved, or you can just carry on. And in which case I won't be able to take care of you at some point. You'll probably end up at a care home. So why don't we go? I said, you haven't been in a care home for years. Why don't we go and look and see what you think? So we went, I phoned and arranged to have a tour of a fairly new care home. And we were taken around. It was, quite lovely. They had a courtyard. They had nice facilities. It was nice and bright. And so we got a tour of the whole thing and came home, and Charles was very quiet. And about an hour after we came back, he said, "No, I am not living there. That is not me." So I think in a way that helped me think, okay, he's actually seen what the option is and he's clear. I honestly really just went for a lot of dog walks for stress. I don't know, or danced around the kitchen. We danced together. We did, we tried to do fun things as well. But I think that's just something that I just carried it until the end. So I can't. There's nothing magical that I know about to help with that stress.
My
No,
My
Sorry,
experience,
go ahead.
if I can jump in as well, my
Yeah.
experience was similar to Sigrid's because although we said he was going to do it, I didn't know definitively that he would. And sometimes he would say things where I would think, oh, he's not going to do MAiD. And I had to return to work and he wasn't able, it got to the place where he couldn't manage like just functioning really well and safely at home. So we had to be in day programming, and because he was a really bright guy, he wasn't stimulated going to the same program. So I got him into 3 different programs and he took the bus so he could talk to people. His eyes were wide open going to the day program because he was in facilities where they did day program and then care. And I did twice have respite where he stayed because there isn't anything in between for folks who have dementia or Alzheimer's. They're in the wrong kind of respite services. And that really reinforced, like Sigrid's husband, it really reinforced the decision that he would be doing MAiD. And he was aware that if he didn't choose MAiD, that would be the next plan, is to be looking at getting him on the wait list. I didn't feel comfortable doing concurrent planning, and I thought that would be confusing for him, but he understood there would be stages. And then I also really focused on now, like enjoying now, not
Yeah.
thinking about the past, not thinking about the future, but really just sinking into today.
Yeah.
And that helped alleviate some of it, not always, but it just helped me let go of it and function at a more peaceful place on a day-to-day basis.
I absolutely agree, Melissa. I think that is the only thing that was helpful to me now that you mentioned it, was just enjoying each day and doing the best we could. But the stress was always kind of there in the background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was always hovering.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
And the other piece I might add to that is what I really wanted to hear through my journey is for somebody to tell me I was going to be okay.
Mm.
And nobody ever told me I was going to be okay. So I wondered what was going to happen to me and if I was going to be okay.
Mm.
And in my journey of doing all the pieces that I did, I discovered that I was okay. But I think that's a really important piece for service providers or folks along the way to say, hey, as much as there is some dying going on, there's a whole heck of a lot of living still, and you're going to be okay.
Thank you for that. Myrna, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to reply to the gal who asked about the stress factor. And I want you all to remember that care partners go through a whole ton of stress, and you have to look after yourselves. But also, so does the person living with the dementia.
Mm-hmm.
And please don't lose that.
Yeah.
And remember to be happy. You know, we choose what kind of life we want to lead, even if it's going to lead quickly to our death. We have the options. We have a brain, even though sometimes it's a bit faulty, but be happy. Love each other.
And I've seen a thread of humor as a coping mechanism throughout each of your stories. And I do think finding humor, finding joy, living in the moment, meeting people where they're at on this journey, all of those are hugely positive things that we can implement. But you're right, there's no escaping the challenges and just the hardness of this this journey. There is a question, I don't know, Ash, if we can speak to it or not, but if you're not approved, can you reapply?
This might actually be easier just to answer verbally. I was
Okay.
trying to reply in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Legally, you can have as many assessments as you want. There's no legal limit on how many assessments. You need 2 eligible assessments to be overall eligible. However, different places and health authorities, for example, in BC, will have different resourcing and different ways that they operationalize it. You don't have to necessarily reapply. Let's say you got 1 eligible assessment and 1 ineligible assessment. My role as care coordinator and there's care coordinators and all the health authorities, would be to link back with you to see if you wanted a third assessment. If you want a third assessment, we would then try and set you up with a third assessor. However, we do talk through why the person wasn't eligible, and I suppose to deliberate whether it's putting the patient through unnecessary stress if it's unlikely that they will be found eligible by everyone, to what end. But you can ask for as many assessments, and legally you can keep being assessed. And it's not that once you're found ineligible, that request form is invalid. Your 1632, which is your patient request record, stays valid. And we've even people have told us, you know what, I don't want MAiD anymore. Please take me off your books. And in that case, we send the information to the Ministry of Health and we say this person doesn't want to proceed. And then they come back and say, actually, you know what, I want to be assessed again. And we've been able to use the assessments still. The Ministry of Health has said that if they still have them, they're still valid. So the process that way isn't that difficult. It's just if it's looking at the reasons you were found ineligible. Some people there's not enough collateral. Some people, they've passed the point of being able to articulate their suffering or their understanding. It's a case by case thing, but you can have as many assessments as you would like, with the small nuance of each health authority doesn't have an endless piece of resources. So there may be waiting lists for like the 4th, 5th, 6th one. Okay.
Thank you. I noticed there was a question kind of farther up in the chat around the Alzheimer Society's position on MAiD. And I will say we have our full statement on our website, which is linked on the helpful resources document, but I can share a little bit to that point. So the Alzheimer Society recognizes that people living with dementia are individuals first and foremost. And I think, Myrna, you've really made that point clear, and that they have the same rights as everyone else, including the right to participate in decisions about their life and their care. And so we respect the rights of all people with dementia to advocate for their individual best interests, and that includes advocating for access to MAiD. So it's really about supporting people's choice in whatever that may look like for them. But you can read more, including information about advanced directives on our website.
I do also think there's a question about you guys and Dying with Dignity, which I think links into that advocacy piece, because Dying with Dignity, I don't know specifically to BC Alzheimer's, but they are a really big advocacy group for MAiD in general, including people with dementia and Alzheimer's.
And we do share their resources as a source of reliable information. So absolutely. And they also are included on the helpful resources document. There's some wonderful nonprofit organizations doing this advocacy work, and now many more options for support, as Melissa and Sigrid, you have both spoken to how these things are evolving so much just in the past few years. There's so many supports, not so many, but more supports available. And so we hope that if anything, people take away from this webinar that you're not alone. Your story matters, your right to this decision matters, and that there are people that you can speak to. And we understand it is stressful.
By the way, I just wanted to mention a book that was The Many Faces of MAiD. I don't know if is that backwards or anyway.
No, it looks good.
Oh, okay. It's the stories of 17 people who've accompanied a loved one through MAiD. One of the stories relates to dementia. The rest are not, but it's a very powerful book, and it's available through the MAiD Family Support Society website as well. And quite a few libraries have it as well. So.
Thank you. Maybe we have time for one final question. Ash, I think I'll direct this to you. Are assessments done only in person, or can they be done online or over the phone?
Yeah, so it again depends where you live,
Oh, yeah.
unfortunately. But legally they can be done virtually. And it just has to be like FaceTime or Zoom, because they're more encrypted. And then if you live in certain areas, like for example in Vancouver Coastal Health, we generally come to your home. But virtual is fine.
Okay. Is there any way to clarify the, I guess, the timeline between the first and second MAiD assessment? No.
I'm sorry, I don't know about Victoria. Someone asked about Victoria. No, there isn't, because again, it differs on health authority, and it also it will differ on the clinical picture and the desired timeline of the patient as well. For example, if someone's at imminent risk of loss of capacity clinically, we will try to prioritize them and get out as soon as possible. But I know some health authorities wait until the person's ready to set a date and things like that, but it's too general. It
I
would be
understand.
misinformation.
No, absolutely. Okay, well, I just want to again thank all of you for sharing your stories, for being so open with our audience, and thank you to everyone who tuned in today. The chat box is full of gratitude and thank yous and people who've been touched by your stories, and so we appreciate that. We appreciate you sharing your experiences as well in the chat box and your questions. As we come to the end of today's presentation, please, if you can, take a few minutes to complete a short evaluation survey on today's webinar. So the link to the survey will be put in the chat box, and it's also available on the screen, alzbc.org/feedback. Your feedback is truly vital for us to continue to improve our webinars and our content. We are always trying to bring new ideas and topics forward, and really do appreciate your feedback. We promise it will take fewer than 5 minutes to complete, and we do deeply appreciate it. I'd also just like to share that I have what I will call the honor to lead the Lived Experience Partner Program with the Alzheimer Society of B.C. And really a huge part of what I do is provide a platform for people with lived experience, both people living with dementia and care partners, to share their stories, just like our panelists did here today. So if you or someone you know is interested in supporting the society as a lived experience partner by sharing your dementia story, please reach out to me. You can email me at livedexperience@alzheimerbc.org. We also have an online application and page on our website about our lived experience engagement. That's at the bottom of your screen there, alzbc.org/lived experience, where you can learn more. And I'll just finish by speaking a little bit about our First Link Dementia Helpline. So if you have any questions about accessing dementia support or would just like to talk to somebody, please feel welcome to give us a call. For people in British Columbia, the First Link Dementia Helpline has English services available Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. at 1-800-936-6033. We also have helplines for the Chinese and South Asian communities available from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And for those living in the Yukon, you can reach the helpline by calling the toll-free number 1-888-852-2579. And all of that information is available on our website. We will have a link to the recording of today's session, which will be available on our on-demand webpage and our YouTube page within usually less than a week. And that will include a link to the helpful resources document, which we shared in the chat today. And just one final reminder to fill out the evaluation if you can. And a big thank you to everybody for being here today and joining in this discussion. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon and that you're able to enjoy a little bit of the sunshine if the sun is shining where you are. Thank you, everyone.